A mate of mine sent me this tagboard layout and a handful of hard to get components and said, just build it, it's cool. No explanation, no schematic, no clue what it's meant to be. As I'm putting this tagboard together, I start seeing familiar things, familiar patterns. If you grew up with the likes of Beck or Rory, you'll recognise these early British fuzz tones inside the circuit before you even get a sound onto it. I think I know what this circuit is, but I'm not saying until the end. While I'm building it, I want you to decide for yourself what you think it is and let me know in the comments. Because let's face it, this one gives itself away if you're paying attention. So this is everything we're going to need for today's build. Jimmy gave me such a good challenge. I love the idea of building the circuit. I'm not too sure what it is. I've got some idea what I think it might be. I'd like to know in the comments what type of fuzz you think I'm going to be building with these components. 3 germanium transistors and a plethora of cool components. So what did Jimmy say? He sent me this picture that's on your screen now. It's a cool circuit and he said, have a go at building this, mate. It's awesome. I'll send you some stuff. And he sent me through these 2 Soviet made in Ukraine 5 microfarad caps. And also this awesome Mullard made in Great Britain. I'm fond of this bad boy. It's an 0879 germanium diode. We're going to be using Tagboard for this bad boy. It's quite a lot of tags and I don't think I'm going to get it in my pedal enclosure. So I'm going to have to mount it on the bottom so that it'll be mounted on the base. Now looking inside that, can anyone guess where this enclosure come from? I bet you can, it's from a previous video. Let me know in the comments if anyone spies where this bad boy's from. Anyway, it's been refinished in nitrocellulose lacquer, some nice graffiti yellow and what have you, and aged. What components have I chosen? Now I've been quite restricted because it's got to sit in a base and I'm not going to have much space above it because there's going to be pots and what have you to just go wild with any components. It's a little bit annoying for me because I do like to use large caps and what have you. I had some huge orange drops to go in here, but alas. So what have I got? We know about the Soviet caps. Them orange drops got replaced with these, which look on the surface of it really boring film caps. But they're actually Siemens caps from Germany. They're old ones, like, I mean, not too old, but like 80s or whatever. We've got an LCR cap for our 1NF. And pretty much that's where the fun ends, apart from some high precision resistors and carbon comp resistors or carbon film resistors or whatever. There's not all that much special in here until we get to the transistors. Oh my lord, I've just spent 2 hours trying to find these. I've got such a massive stash of transistors. It's really hard for me to find anything, and especially with this sort of fuzz. Now, I've found a circuit that I think that this is. I haven't traced it out properly yet, and I've just chose transistors that I know will go with that circuit. I'm pretty sure Jimmy told me that it's meant to have NKT 212s or something like that. 212s for you American guys. But I've gone with Q1 and Q2 are both Mullard OC76s, and Q3 is an AC126. So why did I choose them? Well, in Q1 and Q2, if it's the circuit I'm thinking it is, I need between a 40 and 80 HFE, so the gain. And I also need as low a leakage as I can possibly get. So Q1 here is 53 on the gain. It's within our little mark. And it's also got a leakage of 20, which is fairly low. And then Q2, 72 and 46. Again, fairly low and within our mark. Now Q3, this thing needs to leak because it helps bias everything. If you have a low leakage here, it'll sound quite spiky. Again, if it's the circuit that I think it is. This needs to be above 300 and below 400 for the leakage, which is massive. This is the transistor I've just spent like an hour and a half trying to find. These things, half an hour, no problem. So gain-wise, we're at 170, but this really needs to be higher gain-wise than that. Ideally, I'd have liked it to have been maybe 200, but beggars can't be choosers, so I will just take that. Now, the way that I've laid this out, it may look erratic. You know, we've got a resistor, 2 caps, another resistor, an electrolytic. And normally I'd lay it out resistors, caps, electrolytics, transistors. But I've done it in order of board. So if we look at our drawing, we can see the first component on the left-hand side is a 10k resistor. So I've laid out the 10k resistor first. That means that all I have to do is go straight down the list and I should be putting them all in order. This is the point where the circuit stops being abstract. It is of course populating a tag board. This is the point where the circuit's personality starts coming alive. It's not in component values or component type, but grouping and placement. You can get a feel for what this circuit is meant to be or what it's based off. If you've built enough fuzz pedals, you're already clocking what this pedal isn't. That's important because certain circuits always end up arranging themselves in a certain way. First up on our list is our 10k resistor, and this is the first 10k I'm going in. I'm going to give the legs a little bit of a clean because I'm using old resistors and they get a bit of crud build up on them. Before anyone feels the need to write in the comments, yes, I know there's better ways to clean the legs than using my snips. I don't care. This one's just going to go straight up and down. We can see it goes into tag 1 in the top row and tag 1 in the bottom row. Now also on our drawing we can see in the top row there's a germanium diode that goes into there as well. I'm going to leave that out and mount that further out. And we've also got our transistors which I'm going to mount on the outside as well. The bottom row has a 1NF cap going into it, so I can't solder that. I am just going to solder the top row. Oh, do you know what? That's the worst soldering I've ever done. Great way to start the build, Joe. Well done. There's the first one out. Now the next component is our 1NF cap. So I've got this LCR cap. It's got long legs and it's a long body. And the reason why I'm not too fussed about using this or not worried about it is because we're doing something really weird here. Now I'm pretty sure Jimmy drew this layout himself, so he must have drew it like this. But we're going to skip a tag. So instead of going diagonally, we're going to skip a tag in the top row and go straight across. It's a bit weird. It's not something that you'd often see Tagboard do. But it's not something you'd often see on a tag board. But even that, there's really not that much space. So what I'm going to have to do is, I'm going to have to just bend this tag out a little bit and this tag out a little bit. To try and give myself a little bit of room just to get this in there. It's kind of odd. No, it's still not going to do it. So because it's going to be in the way, what I'm going to have to do is what I was trying to avoid doing, so we can put our tags back now, is the other method of making space is to lift it off the board. And the reason why I didn't want to do that is because the same as I said before, we're limited by space above. So don't want to lift it up too much, otherwise it's going to foul a component like above it. But I do want to give myself some space on the board. So there we are. There's our 1NF cap. All I've done is just bent the legs over on themselves, nice and easy. And then that way we can slot it in both of the tags and it'll lift it off the board, which means that we've got space underneath to fit all of our other components. Now what I am going to do is, I'm going to get it so then it's roughly in the centre, pinch it with 2 fingers and then just twist it so then it's going straight. And the reason why is it'll just look better. Simple as that. It looks like it's going from the second tag along to the second tag along when really it's not. And I can live with that. What I'm going to have to do though is solder this leg in because it keeps popping out, which is rather annoying. I feel like I haven't done a tagboard build for absolutely ages. It's crazy. It's either been kit builds or Vero builds or whatever. Well, not a proper tagboard build. I did the pickup simulators, but that was barely a component in there. Right, so there's that up off the board. Now, if we go back to our drawing, we can see our next capacitor is 100 NF. Now, our 100 NF really doesn't have the legs to reach right the way across, which is a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend one leg over, which is going to go into the same tag as our 1NF on this top row, the third tag along. And we also need to get this leg to reach the bottom row second tag along. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my legs that I've just snipped off, make a loop out of it, wrap it around the leg on our cap. Once it's on there, I'm just going to give it a little pinch with my snips. Don't pinch it too hard or you'll end up cutting it. But a little pinch just to seal it in place. There we are. Now when we solder that, it should stay in place. I know there's better ways to extend the legs, but this is just how I've always done it. And there's going to be someone who writes in the comments, just buy a capacitor with longer legs. Yeah, absolutely, I could do that. But I haven't. It's okay, so this isn't going to want to stand up. But what I can see is this bottom row, there's nothing else going in there, so I can give that a solder. Like so. And then all I have to do is lift the cap up and situate it straight. Kind of like that, the caps are blue and yellow, just like the enclosure. I'm just going to bend that round so then it's sitting straight, same as that last cap. Next up is going to be a 15k resistor. Now if we look at our drawing, we can see that goes straight up and down, goes from the 100 NF cap in the third row, third tag from the top, straight down to the third tag on the bottom. Should be a fairly simple one to fit in, and there's nothing else going in these apart from wires going to various points of the board, so we can actually solder that in. And give it a tidy up. There. Now we're on to the fourth tag along, and this is a little bit difficult because we've got a 5 microfarad cap, which is our big Soviet 5 microfarad, and also a 3.3k resistor, which I didn't have, so I had to use this high precision resistor and then just a normal resistor to make up the value. First things first, before we start, I'm just going to solder them together because I seem to have not done that before when I was prepping for the show. And now that they're together, that's our 3.3k resistor. I think I'm just going to run the resistor along the lying down, if you like, and then run the cap over the top, just because the cap's going to take a fair old bit of space. Maybe I'll lie it this way. Will it fit? Figuring this stuff out live, why not? What I don't want to do normally, I'd just fit the resistor and then put the cap way over the top, but I don't want it to foul anything, which is kind of annoying, mind you. Yeah, I'm just going to lie the resistors down. It's not going to look pretty, but it's going to work. Well, I hope it's going to work, that is. And so now they're in and lying down, we can sort out the cap. Electrolytic capacitors are polar, as you all well know, no doubt. This particular capacitor has a line around the top like an indent. That's the positive. And then the flat end down here is the negative. If we look at our drawing, we can see the negative points to the top. So if we flip this round, we're going to fit it in this way. Now I'm going to make sure that the writing's at the top. I don't understand Russian or Soviet caps. More accurate, I suppose it's Soviet, isn't it? Because the vintage, and they were no doubt made in Ukraine, because that's where all their gear was made. Right, I'm going to bend the legs on itself and then bend them back out again. Being careful not to foul the body on this one because there's no insulation on it. It is going to sit quite high off the board, which is worrying, but we'll have to figure that out afterwards. Maybe only as high as that, I'm hoping. And there's nothing else going into these tags in the centre, so we're going to get away with soldering both of them in, which is handy. Now, I'm going to clip this as close as I can to that tag, and if I bend the tag back a little bit, I'll be able to slot this in and then bend the tag back in place. Good as new. Now we just centre it a bit and give both ends a solder, make sure that the resistor is in there, which is popped out, of course it has. There. Wet the tip, well hey. Now, we're on to the next tag along, which is another 5 microfarad cap. So it's another one of our Soviet caps. I'm just going to straighten the legs out because they're all twisted from the post. Yeah, Jimmy sent me this kit so long ago. So he sent me the schematic and a few bits to build it. And it was just one of them things that you keep saying, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to get to it, and I just never get to it. But we will get there in the end, I suppose. It was cool of them to source out the 5 microfarad caps and send them, because they are a bit fiddly to find. Now our next electrolytic cap, it goes into the next tag along on the bottom row, but it misses the next tag along on the top row and moves on, which is handy. And also, quite frankly, it's going to look better, but also the negative points upwards and the positive down. That means that I'm going to try and get these two to sit next to each other, just because I think that's going to look a bit better. Don't know if I'm going to be able to achieve it though, because there ain't that much space in there. And what I don't want to do is foul the body of the cap. Now we can't solder the top row, so if you look at our drawing, we can't solder in the top row. We can only solder the bottom row because there's a 10k resistor going in the top row too, which is helpful. Let's see. I think I'm going to do it there. Let's get that bottom row soldered in, and hopefully that'll cement it in place and they'll sit next to each other nicely. I'd love to know if anyone's going to have a go at this mystery fuzz. Or if you can't be bothered having a go at it, this one will be for sale now on my website, hellosailoreffects.com. If anyone's interested in buying it, there is only going to be one though. These seem like a right pain in the backside to build, so I won't be building many of them. Next up, we've got 2 resistors going in. First is a 10k. This is going to go straight up and down into the 5 UF cap, the negative side, and then straight down into the tag below. We can't solder the tag below because we've also got this 470k resistor going in there. I really like the look of this tag board, how it's shaping up. It seems to flow really well. Jimmy's done a good job drawing this one. Oh no, I've just soldered the bottom tag. So, I wasn't meant to solder the bottom tag because there is another resistor going in there, which is helpful. I was meant to just solder the top tag, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to have to solder the top tag and then try and squeeze that resistor in there through a soldered joint. Well done, Joe. Fool. That's because I'm too busy nattering on, talking instead of watching what I'm doing. Oops. Right, so this one's just going to stretch right across from the bottom of the 10k and up to the next tag along. So I'm just going to snip this side a bit shorter, because to get it in, what I'm going to have to do is heat up this solder joint and then poke this through it, which wouldn't be too bad, but I've got them 2 big caps just sat right above it. Oh, there you go, I've loosened the joint off. That's ideal. So we can resolder that bottom row, but what we can't do is we cannot solder the top because there's another cap going in there. Another resistor going in there. Quite a bit of a network of resistors going on now. Actually, I totally lied there. Next up is going to be a 100 NF cap, and that's going straight up and down from the top tag to the bottom tag. I can't solder the top tag because there's another 100k resistor coming out of it. That's fine. But I can solder the bottom tag. I'm going to have to extend one of the legs, same as we did for our last 100 NF cap. Just because they're made for like PCBs or Vero board. They're not made for Tagboard. So the legs just aren't long enough. I'm always trying to use stuff for things that it's not meant to be used on, you know. Can't help myself. There's that leg extended. We just snip off the excess and that should go in nicely. Maybe if I put it in the other way around, it's more space down this bottom end so I can get the body of the cap in. For all those of you who actually watch more than one video, did anyone watch the Klon op-amp video that I put out the other day? And what did you think of it? There was less soldering and more tone chasing. Is that something that you want to see, or would you prefer to see more tagboard builds, more DIY builds? So that's sort of my bread and butter. I felt like making that video, so I did. Right, there's our 100 NF capping. Next up, if you look at our drawing, we can see coming out of it is a 100k resistor, which is this tiny one here. When I put this little kit together, I hadn't got any cool 100k resistors, but I have just took a delivery of a load of them, so I don't know why I'm still using this one, but while we're here, might as well. If we go back to our drawing, you can see that the top row we can solder in, and the bottom row we can't because we're going straight to a 10k resistor. There, and now our 10k resistor is just going straight up and down, and we can actually solder that in, which is good because I don't know, I really hate it when you can't just solder after you've fitted the component. It winds me up, I don't know why. Last two components on the board now in the centre. First up is a 100 microfarad cap, or 100 UF as I like to say, because it really annoys the internet for some reason. Honestly, people think that you're unintelligent if you don't use their correct terminology, which is insane to me, but whatever. Now if we look at our drawing, we can see that the negative side of the cap at the bottom here does indeed go to the bottom. And now on our cap, our shorter leg is the negative, but it's also got a stripe down it, so if you're building for the first time, these electrolytics are polar and you want the stripe, the negative part, pointing down. Now there isn't anything else going into these tags in the centre of the board, so we don't have to worry about that. We can solder both sides in, which really does make me feel good. Would you believe, as I was moving my hand away there, I knocked the cap out of position so it went central. Well done, John. There we go. I think I've done really well to keep the level down here. It's quite compact, considering. I'm happy with that. And then last but not least is a 27k resistor. This is an old one, so my mate Warren bought me a load of components when I moved into this workshop. He said to help get you on your feet, start you out, whatever. He just bought someone's whole collection. I think it might have been Justin Drawbridge, actually, shout out to him. And I got a load of, well, everything basically, and I've slowly been sorting through it all, and these tiny little carbon film resistors were in there, and I think they're awesome, so thanks very much, Warren, for that, and Justin for selling them in the first place. There we go. And there's nothing else going in this in the centre of the board, so we can indeed solder that. And after a quick tidy up, there. That's the board fully soldered up in the centre. Next up, I'm going to work on the parts that are going in these centre holes here. And what's going in there is link wires and our germanium diode. So here's our germanium diode. I'm going to deal with that first, just because it's quite fragile and I want to get it out the way. And it's top left. We all read from top to the bottom, left to right. Well, we do here in England anyway. So I'm going to do it that way round. You've got to be careful when you're straightening these legs out, by the way. I've ruined so many of these diodes because they're old and fragile and what have you. And I straighten them out, you crush the leg into shape and the whole glass diode just disintegrates. I mean, you can see the red paint coming off it there. In fact, before we do anything, let's give this a test. So if you have one of these Fluke 101 multimeters, you can get one in the link in the description, by the way, through Amazon. And I do get a little bit of a kickback with no extra charge to yourself. You can flick it round to the ohm sign, press the button twice, and you get up this little funny sign here, which is diodes. And all we do is we put our one lead each end. It'll only conduct one way, by the way, which should be this way, I think. There we are. You see, that's a really, really weak diode, 260. But if we were to go the other way around, you're not going to get any forward voltage. I always think of diodes as being like a non-return valve. So if you're mechanically minded, like a non-return valve is what it is. It's funny because only the clever people in the Navy get to go electrical engineers. And I was definitely not one of the clever people. Right, so this diode is going into the first tag on the left-hand side in the top row. And it's the side with the line on that goes to that tag. So that's going to be this red patch on this side. But it'd be like a black line or white line or whatever on your diode. Now to fit it in, I'm going to solder that in there. And I'm just going to bend this leg. First of all, I'm going to make sure the Great Britain is pointing outwards. So that's what people see. I'm going to bend this leg over without trying to put any pressure on the top of the diode. There's a way of sort of pushing against it and bending at the same time. You get a feel for this after you've ruined a million of them. I think I got in one of my last videos someone complaining about me using snips to bend wires or whatever. I just do it a lot, so it's not too bad. But that then leaves the second tag along. I need a line coming up to connect to this. So I'm going to fit that first. I'm going to use this long one. And all I'm going to do is just lie it into the hole and just solder it straight in where it is. There. Cool down a bit and then I'll straighten it up so it's pointing directly up. There. Now all I have to do then is solder this straight in there. So first things first, if I solder the bottom, now you should really put a heatsink on these when you're soldering them, but again, I've kind of got a feel for it. I don't spend too long on there with the iron, so it doesn't matter. And that's because the Hacko, by the way, I don't know if anyone's looking for a soldering iron over the new year to start their new hobby. If anyone's starting it out, I always recommend a Hacko, but they are pretty expensive. So if you're a beginner, maybe you don't want to fork out on one. But and then to join them two together, I am literally just going to solder them. There. I mean, you could put heat shrink around it and stuff, but I'm really hoping this doesn't foul anything inside the enclosure. Now next, we need to start adding some wires in. And the first wires I'm going to put in is the black wires, which is our ground. Remembering in this pedal, it's actually a positive ground, funnily enough. And we can see on our drawing that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 or 4 ground wires. 3 on the board and 1 that goes out to the pots. There's our wires all in place, underneath the board of course. As you can see, I've just joined them up to the bottom of them centre holes. Now I could have joined them on the top, but I just want to keep it minimalistic looking because I kind of like how this looks. Next up, we're going to be joining together all of the red wires. So if we look at our drawing, we can see the bottom of our 10k and 470k here. That's going to go right the way across to our 100 our 100 UF cap, or 100 microfarad cap, and then also join to the next tag along on our 27k resistor. I'm going to go ahead and get them in now. There's our next set of wires now in place. The last link, if we look at our drawing, you can see it goes between 2 of our transistors on the top row. I'm not going to fit that in yet. I'm going to wait until the transistors are in place and I'll fit that afterwards. So this is an interesting one. If we look at Jimmy's drawing, we can see that we have our 3 transistors in the top row, starting from the left hand side, 1, 2, 3. However, they're not actually labelled up which one's Q1, Q2 and Q3. So that's interesting. The best way I can figure out how to do that is if we look at our input, which is down here on the bottom row, round about midships, a yellow wire. That goes to our 100 NF cap. And then through that, it goes to the base of 1 transistor. I'm going to say that's Q1. Fair enough. Then to find out Q3, I'm going to go to our output. Well, our output comes from the tone pot over on the right hand side. And if we follow the 2 pink wires that come from that tone pot, they come over here and stretch down to this first transistor on the left hand side. So I'm going to say that that's Q3. Seems to reason that it's the last in the circuit, so it should be Q3. That would make the middle transistor Q2. I don't know if anyone has a better way of doing that, but that's all I could think of doing. With fuzz circuits like this, transistors always tell you more than the circuit itself. It's not about the part numbers, it's about the role that the transistor does. The front end on this one wants to be polite, predictable, boring even. But if those transistors misbehave, the whole thing's going to collapse. So if you're still trying to guess what this is the first clue. As ever, I'm going to start left to right, which means that we're starting with Q3, which is our, what is it? It's an AC126. This is where the circuit stops being civilized. It's more sensitive, it's more temperamental, and a bit of bad behaviour just changes everything. If you've ever played a 3 transistor fuzz that felt really alive, it's usually this transistor that's doing that. The legs aren't very long on this, so it's going to be interesting to fit. Well, first of all, I'm going to use my Peak Atlas DC855 to try and get the pin out, because there's no point in guessing. I mean, I can look at the dot on it, which will probably be the collector, because it's a PNP transistor, fine. But I'd rather just know rather than guess, because some of these old transistors can be a bit weird. If you want to get one of these Peak Atlas DC855s, I'd really appreciate it if you bought it through the link in the description. That's an affiliates link. I do get a small kickback, and it helps me buy things like my own Peak Atlas DC855. So this is telling us it's a PNP Germanium. Gives us our pin out. Red is the collector, green is the base, and blue is the emitter. It says it's 182 HFE, so gain, so that's gone up, which means that the transistor's heated up or whatever. And it's saying leakage is 655. Ah, man, that's well too high. I'm going to use it anyway, just because I spent hours looking for this transistor. And it seems like the lights in here, because I've probably got, what, 5 or 6 lights on me? Maybe they've heated it up and it's just a little bit out of spec, but we shall see. Anyway, so red is the collector, which is our dot. And that's going to go on the right-hand side. Green is the base, which is our centre, fine. And blue is the emitter. Well, that's good, because it's going to go in this way round, which means that we're going to see the AC126, which I kind of like. Funnily enough, a 126 in the Navy, if anyone's ever served NATO-wise, it's probably the same for the whole of NATO, but a 126 is a charge. So if you lose something or you break something, and they're going to give you a charge and you take it out your pay, it's called a C126. So seeing AC126 on this is kind of setting off my memories from being charged loads of stuff. Most notably, when my son was born, which is 18 years ago now. Don't feel like I'm old enough to have an 18-year-old son. But anyway, the month he was born, I dropped the radio over the side when I was drunk, and they charged me £600 for that, and it come out, like, I don't know, 2 weeks before his birthday, which was fantastic. Before his birthday, before he was born. So skint the first month that he was on the scene. Brilliant. Thank you, Navy. Right. Let's get this last leg done. Bit awkward soldering that one in because the legs are really short. Hopefully it cools down and it works. I have a feeling it may be a bit temperamental, but if we have any snags, we'll hit it with the audio probe and we'll know where the problem is and we'll just swap that out for something else. Now, onto Q2. These first 2 transistors are doing the quiet work. They don't need to be hot. They don't need to be leaky. When they're right, the pick attack makes sense and everything downstream from them behaves as it should. Older fuzz circuits tend to live and die by that restraint. So here's Q2, it's an OC76, full legs, it's never been inside anything electrical, so it is NOS, new old stock. That's turned into a bit of a buzzword now, isn't it? Like NOS transistors. But it does actually stand for something. I think a lot of us forget that. So it's telling us it's a PNP germanium, gives us our pinout, 77 HFE, which is gain, and 85 or 35 for the leakage. That's gone up a little bit, but again, it's hot in here, so I'm not surprised. Red is the base, which is the center tag. That's fine. So if we look at our drawing, we can see that the order goes emitter, base, collector. Same as our last one. And it goes in the next tags along, so we don't have to mess about, trying to figure out which is which. The blue is our emitter, so that's that side. And the green is our collector, so that's on this side. That's fine. Annoyingly, you can't see the OC76 because it'll be pointing at the bottom of the pedal, but oh well. I mean, I could really in fact I might have to bend them upwards because it's fitting in this enclosure here and it's going to be right over the battery. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see what we have to do with them once they're in. But for now, let's just get them in there, eh? Right, so I'm going to solder that in there. I always start with the center leg and then you can adjust it to make sure that it's definitely straight when you come to do the other two, which it is. Brilliant. I did consider finding some Soviet transistors for this one just because Jimmy had sent me these Soviet caps. I was all excited about them, but I just couldn't. It's such a pain. Anything like this, a free transistor fuzz, germanium wise, it's a nightmare getting them to match. That's why you pay so much for them, is because the builder has to go through hundreds of transistors to get ones that fit the bill, Awkward. Anyway. There's that one in place. Now on to Q3. No, Q1. Two transistors can go in a circuit and have the same leakage, the same gain, the same everything, but feel completely different. Too clean and it shouts at you. Too messy and it kind of folds in on itself. Getting this part right is why people argue about these fuzz pedals decades after they were made. Here's Q1. It is another OC76. It's never been inside a electrical machine before because it's got the full length legs. I forget where I got these from now. I buy that many job lots of components that it could have come from pretty much anywhere. So that's telling us it's a PNP germanium transistor. Gives us our pinout. 55 was the current gain and a leakage of 29. So this one's actually in the best condition of them all, I would say. Probably the most stable. Red is the base. Great. Blue is the collector, which if we look at our drawing, we can see goes on the... Oh, it's the other way around on this one, sneaky. So if we look at our drawing, we can see this one goes collector, base, emitter. Good job I looked at that because I almost put it in the same way round. So our collector's blue, which means that goes on the left-hand side. And the emitter is green, which goes on the right-hand side. And red is the base in the centre. Perfect. Annoyingly, that means that also puts this, so then the OC76 is pointing down. Imagine that. They've both been stamped the opposite way round from each other and they're both on the wrong side for this pedal. Fantastic. What time to be alive, eh? Right, there's something wrong here. Ha! So look, I was just looking at my drawing and seeing that there's two tags at the end after you've put this transistor in, but there isn't here. And then if you look closely, you can see that these two legs go into the same hole. That's why they're the opposite way round. Well done, Joe. So I didn't notice that, which means that I've gone ahead and soldered that one in already, which means that it's going to be awkward to fit. Brilliant. Wiring always looks boring on camera, but this is where fuzz pedals earn their reputation. With Tagboard, there's no compromises, there's nowhere to hide. You can see everything. Little decisions like ground lead length can make all of the difference. And I'll be the first to admit that I don't always make the right choices. I tend to go what looks good in the enclosure rather than what actually works. I'd like to know in the comments, do you like your pedals to look good inside and follow one wiring set, or would you prefer to have shorter leads and a better sounding pedal? Better? Better's subjective. A different sounding pedal. So I've managed to get everything into the enclosure, but what I forgot about was our little link wire between our Q1 and Q2. The blue link wire, which I didn't add in. It's going to be a nightmare to get in now because it's now in the enclosure. Perfect. So what am I going to do? If we look at our drawing, you can see that it's between the base of Q2 and the emitter of Q1. So the base of Q2 is this center position here, and the emitter of Q1 is over here. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to solder it to Q1. Let's get our snips on the go. I'm using flat nose snips so then I don't snip it while I'm trying to hold it. But all I'm going to do is wet the tip a bit, hold the wire up against Q1 and just get it to stick in there for a second. And then I'll just bend it round and make it come and meet Q2 at that point. Careful not to foul it on anything else because I don't want it to short anything else out. It's like an uncovered wire, so we definitely don't want to short anything out there, do we? And again, I'm just going to wet the tip and hold it on. Being careful not to burn any of the components that are in there. There. Now I think I'm going to have to go and resolder the first bit that we put in. It's not quite as good as I would like. There. Done. It would have been embarrassing me forgetting that and then coming back to it trying to figure out why the pedal isn't working. Now as you can see, I'm going to have to run wires from this part of the enclosure round to this part. It's a bit of a pain, but you know, needs must. So I'm going to start top left of our drawing and I'm going to wire it in from that way round. So top left of our drawing is actually Q3 and it's the center leg, so the base of Q3 comes round and that attaches to our sustain pot lug 2. That is this pot here. In fact, while I'm here, I best label that up as volume and then I'll know which way round I'm going. And that one can be sustain. Because otherwise, while you're wiring it up, if you can't see it straight away, sometimes I go into autopilot and I may mess this sort of stuff up. Now, annoyingly, if we look at Q3 there, Q3 goes into the outside lug, so it's going to be better if we try and squeeze this wire into the centre here. There's nothing in that lug. I nearly said close enough for government work then, but people are starting to get annoyed with that. I don't know why, but seems that whenever I come up with a saying or anything like that, the electrical engineers in the world, like the people who do it for a profession, seem to get really annoyed. I can't imagine living my life like that. So I'm going to run this wire around. It's going to come round this side here and up, and it's going to the centre, so lug 2 of our sustain pot, which is right there. And what we've got to remember is the tone pot and the volume pot are actually facing the wrong way round. So they're going to be the opposite way round. And that's just because there's no space to squeeze it in this enclosure. To do this build, what I should have done is just got a bigger enclosure and give myself enough room. Because it's not a pedal I'm familiar with. I'm squeezing it round, pre-drilled holes and stuff like that. It just wasn't a very sensible thing to do. But then again, if it was sensible, it probably wouldn't have been made by Hello Sailor Effects, I suppose. Has any of the tone geeks out there, Dave Barry or one of you guys, have you noticed what circuit it is yet? Has anyone come up with a plan? I will reveal what I think it is at the end. Right, so sticking in the top row, the next thing that's soldered in the top row is the only other thing apart from the ground, is the volume pot lug 3, which is the input to our volume pot. And that comes from the very end tag here. Now we can go two ways. We can run the wire around the outside edge and follow this route, which is what I'm going to do. Or we could have come round this way. But you know me, I'm much rather keep things in the same wiring loom. And I like the idea of both of these wires coming from that direction. Also, this will be running on the outside of the enclosure then. I don't think it makes a difference in pedals, if I'm really honest. But amplifiers, you kind of want to keep your wiring out the way, I suppose. Speaking of which, I'm looking at building an amplifier for a little bit of a series. I want to build a 100 watt dumble. Modulus Amplification have got a 100 watt dumble they've just come out with, and I'm like, nah, I need to build that. So watch this space. I'll be doing a video series on that. I'd like to know if people are actually interested in it, or whether it's just me who's interested in it. If I deviate from pedals, or from like when I've done the guitars and stuff, they never seem to perform as well. And I'm just assuming because people don't tune in here to see me build an amplifier, they tune in to see me build pedals, I suppose. Right, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to try and keep these wires running next to each other, so when I come and put all the cable ties in, they become one wire. I'm remembering that this pot is the wrong way round because it's facing backwards, so lug 3 is actually on this side this time. Yeah, this post, I could have took it off really, but it was warping the enclosure, so I stopped where I was and didn't. And for those of you who haven't guessed, the enclosure come from the Behringer Octavia. I weren't too happy with the mods on it. I thought it sounded better beforehand, so I repurposed the enclosure, because the enclosure is actually pretty decent. It's probably worth the money of the pedal alone, never mind. Really impressed with the Behringer stuff. I wish they wouldn't steal the branding though. That is a little bit annoying. But as far as bringing affordable effects to people who can't afford them, you can't argue with their pricing point, can you? Right, so that's the top row done. I'm not going to wire in the ground just yet, or the positive ground. I'll do that in a sec. So we're going to switch to the bottom row, and if we look at our drawing, we can see on the bottom row, the first and second tags are these pink wires, and they go around and to our tone pot, lugs 1 and 3. I'm going to wire them in now. There's them 2 pink wires now put in. Of course, I'm using the same colour wire. I know that seems to annoy some people on the internet. Don't know why. I don't need to have different colour wires in this tiny little space to see where everything's going. I'll just follow my schematic or use my multimeter and my brain and figure out where they're going. It's mad to me that people get annoyed with that, but whatever. On the bottom row now, the only things left to go in from the bottom row is our -9 volts and our input. So I'm going to use the input first, because we'll run the 9 volts in a sec. I'm trying to stay away from this battery snap just yet. That is where our input comes from. And I'm going to run that round this wiring loom, and it's going to go to the input here, which is the front left tag of our 3-pole double throw switch. That's going to be our input. Now we're going to deal with the negative and positive wires, which I've kind of been avoiding, and I'm going to start with the battery snap. So what I like to do is take a battery and attach it to our battery snap so we can get a gauge of where it's going to sit. Now it's going to sit in this holder here. Brilliant. And really we want it to point downwards, so then it's not fouling on anything here. That way round, fine. And our 2 wires, one is going to come round to this pin here, the switched jack on our input jack, which is going to be our positive actually. That one's going to go that way. The problem is it doesn't give as much wire to work with. If you want to like change the battery, you have to kind of unplug it where it is. That's going to be an awkward one, but I think that's something we're just going to have to deal with. So I'm probably going to run the positive on its own. I'm not going to extend the wire like I thought I was going to. I'll just run it as it is, round here and up the top, and then it can drop into, actually it's going to be this tag right here, which is this pin here, which is our switched connection. That means that when we unplug our input jack, it's going to disconnect the ground to our circuit, which means the battery won't run out. And then this black wire, our negative, is going to come round and go into our -9 volts, which is, if we look at our drawing, you can see right between the 10k and 470k, there's a -9 volts that comes off there. To get that in there, I'm going to extend this wire. So to extend the wire, all I'm going to do is snip it and strip the insulation. Bit tricky stripping the insulation on these ones because it's so thin. The core of the wire is so thin. And then I'll just replace it with some of my silicone wire. partly because it will match everything else in the pedal, and partly because the black wire isn't long enough to actually reach where I need it to go. So if we twist them together, there isn't much wire to twist together here, to be fair. We can get that soldered and make them one. If I can never get it in. There. Now all we have to do is straighten them out and get a bit of heat shrink on it, so we can extend it with that. And I've got two different sizes of heat shrink out because I wasn't sure how many wires I was going to join together. But we're just going to use this little stuff, and that'll cover the bare wire, and that's all you really need to do. Now again, I feel like all I've done this episode is say, and the internet's going to hate me for this, but to heat shrink wire, instead of getting a heat gun out, I always just use a lighter. And I know the internet hates that as well. It's just another one of them things that I do that people dislike. But look how easy that was. It was convenient. I didn't have to get anything out or plug anything in. Right, so this is going to come along. In fact, I'm going to bend that back on itself. There. This is going to come over the top and follow our normal wiring loom. So over here. And then round and straight to the bottom of our two resistors. So right next to the input, really, to the left hand side of the input on our drawing. And that's where that's going to connect in there. If this was an NPN pedal, that would essentially be the 9 volts, the power supply. Whereas the black wires on there is our positive ground, but it's our ground. And that's what's going to attach to our jacks and stuff like that. There we are. Now, our red wire, which is our positive ground, I'm just going to follow the wiring loom. Take it round here. Just going to go up and over this bit, just because all the other wires are going to come this way, so I've got to be careful which way I run it, because if I run it in a weird way, then all the others have got to follow it, if that makes sense. Still always use my screwdrivers to push the wire in place when I'm manipulating it to get it in place for soldering and stuff. I can't help myself, I just always have. And funnily enough, this is pretty much bang on the right length that I need to go into that tag. Now, one thing I will say is if you're using a battery snap and not like your own power supply or jack or something, if you're using a battery snap, the wire, the sheathing on the wire is pretty naff and it melts really easy. So it's not like the silicone wire that basically you can't even melt with a hacko. This stuff will melt really easy. So when you're soldering it into your jacks and stuff, you need a lot of heat going in there. So it's a bit awkward. I'll tidy it up once it's all in there. Close enough for government work there. Well, next I think I'm going to add in the ground. So if you look at our drawing, any of these black wires, wherever they connect in, could be our ground. So I'm going to connect just the other side of our input. Here you've got your 100 NF cap and your yellow wire going to the input. But if you look at the tag to the right hand side of that, we've got a 100k and a 10k resistor there. I'm going to go in from that tag there just because it's right on its front row, it's right where I need it to be. So I'm going to come from that, and that's going to go to all the places on the circuit it needs to go to. So the two jacks up here, it's going to go to, if we look at our drawing again, our volume pot and our sustain pot on pins 1. So sustain pot and volume pot, pins 1. And that's it really, because there's no need for an LED because it's a positive ground effect. Next up, I'm going to wire the output, which goes to this tag here on the 3-pole double throw switch. And it comes from the volume center lug, so lug 2 on the volume pot. It's round here. I'm going to follow this wiring loom And I'm going to come up here and go straight to that output. Okay, so I finished the wiring and I just couldn't help myself but try and plug it in, see if I could get some sounds. And of course, there was zero sounds. There never is. So, to trace this bad boy down, I've got it hooked up to my TC Electronics wiretap is feeding the signal into here. Then instead of coming out of the pedal, what we've got is my connection to my blonde Fender Showman is through this here and through my audio probe. So we've got the audio probe. If you want to know how to make one of these, I've got a video on my channel that says something like fix any pedal. We've got the ear for the audio probe here. Now anywhere I touch with this is going to amplify the signal coming from the wiretap and going into this pedal. So first of all, are we getting signal in? Yes. And then is signal coming through the switch? Yes. And then the input to the switch to the circuit is over here. Great. Now the first transistor. Yes. Coming out of the first transistor sounds pretty good. What about the second transistor? And then third. So it's a bit weaker, something funky's going on. So let's turn the wiretap off. Something funky's going on and I just need to go back and check my wiring. Okay, so I've retraced the circuit out and I'd just like to know, did anyone notice what I'd done wrong while I was putting it together? I'd be interested to know. But let me tell you, if we just look at our pots here, do you notice anything a bit odd? Well, I did, because the tone pot has nothing going to the lug 2, which is kind of weird. The pot wouldn't work. So if we go back to our drawing, we can actually see that lug 2 on the tone pot is the output wire, so it should be connected to this. But I connected the center of our volume pot, lug 2 of our volume pot, to the output, because on most pedals the volume pot is the output, because it's like a post pedal shunt to ground, if you like. So that's weird. So where does our volume pot, or where is it meant to go? So if we look at our drawing, we can see this green wire coming from our lug 2 volume pot going right the way round to over here to the 15k resistor, the third lug along. So 1, 2, 3, third lug along, we can see there's nothing attached there. So what I need to do, first things first, I need to attach this wire here. Let's see if we can get hold of it. This wire here to our tone pot lug 2. So where are you going? You're going around there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it follow the same wiring loop, and I'm just going to take it as it goes past the tone pot. I'm just going to snag it off and solder it in there, and then that way we don't have to mess about resoldering our 3-pole double throw switch, because you know they're one of them components that if you put too much heat into it you can do damage to it. So why not avoid that if we can? What a silly mistake, eh? That's because I went into autopilot and didn't look at the schematic. Sorry, Jimmy. I know you drew out this lovely schematic for me to follow, and there's me just not following it. There we go. There's that in. So now we've got to deal with our volume pot. So lug 2 here. Well, we could really split this and then solder another wire to it and just heat shrink it. But for the sake of it, while we're here, I'm just going to take it out. I know it's better not to solder your pots like it's 7 billion times, but just for this, I'm going to crack on and do it anyway. It's so weird having a volume pot that doesn't feed into it. I tell you what though, there was a massive drop in volume around Q3, and I'm hoping that's not because the transistor's a little bit too out there, you know. It's affected by temperature quite a bit. The gain changed a fair bit, and more importantly, so did the leakage. If you remember when we were testing the pinout on it. So now I'm going to just run that round the wiring loom and right the way over to the board. Interesting. Does this give anyone any clues as to what circuit this is, do you think? I will be revealing right at the end of the video what I think this this circuit is, and it's going to be so interesting to see what everyone else thinks it is. There's people who watch this channel who are way cleverer than me and will no doubt have looked at this and instantly known what it is. Simon from JSA, for example, no doubt he'll have spotted this straight away. These wires are really starting to get on my nerves now. I can't wait to get them in a cable tie. It's one thing I hate about this, when you have two halves of an enclosure and you put half the pedal in one half. It's just a nightmare running the wires. Okay, almost like it was meant to go there. And then we can get another test done. I'm really hoping it's going to work. To be fair, I didn't expect this to work first time because it's a bit of a complex fuzz build and I've never built one before, so I wasn't expecting to just drop it straight in there and it'd be fine. Although I must admit, I thought it was going to be the Q3 bias that was the issue and not something like this, but there. I think before we get a sound sample, I'm probably going to get some cable ties in there because this is just annoying me. There we have it, everything's in, all of our cable ties are in place and it's looking pretty good. I've got to say thank you to Jimmy for putting me onto this circuit and sending me the bits to build it. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to do a proper sound sample, but just to test that the little mods I did before worked, let's have a little listen to the wiretap. And remember, actually, before I do this, this is the wrong impedance, so it's going to be kind of like putting an overdrive in front of your Germanium pedal. It's not going to sound great, but it will test if the sound works. Believe it or not, that's the tone. And that's the volume. And go all the way down. The sustain does. Very odd. The sustain turns the sound all the way off. The volume doesn't. I'll tell you what, it's got some gain. This is the bit that always amazes me because everyone chooses different things. It's mad. Crazy that we all have different points of view and different styles that we like. So to that end, which of these three sets of knobs would you choose if you were having this on your Jimmy Fuzz? So first of all, I'm going to start off with the Dumble style knobs. Now I had to go for two of the large ones and one of the smaller ones because there just weren't enough room to get them in there. And as you can see here, this front one sits over the edge of the slope because the holes were already pre-drilled in this. I didn't have a choice because it's the Octavio pedal. That little lip there is really annoying me, so I don't think I'd pick them. Next up, we've got the standard MXR style knobs in white. I actually really like them for this pedal. I think they look good. They don't sit over the slope too much. And the white kind of suits the vibe of the pedal. And then lastly but not least, we have these vintage style Fuzz Bakelite knobs. I kind of like them. Let's get them the right way around. I kind of like them. It would have helped if I'd have undone the screw on them all. How do I manage to do this every bloody video? Anyway, so they're alright. I like them. I suppose it comes down to the fact of what you want. Do you want black or do you want white as the knobs? I kind of like the black looking ones, the silver. Look and feel probably a bit more premium. But that may be my unconscious bias because I know a lot of pedal companies use this style of knobs. And I hate being the same as anyone. Let me know in the comments, out of these three, which would you choose? And now it's time for the sound sample. But before we get to the sound sample, I'd like to know in the comments what you think this pedal is. What do you think the circuit is? I'll let you know my thoughts after the sound sample. I'd just like to take this time to say thank you to everyone who subscribed this year. It's been mental. In 2025, we went from 1k subscribers to nearly 10k, like 9.8k. That is mental. Thank you so much to everyone who subscribed. YouTube shows me that only 40% of people who watch this channel subscribe. If you're one of the 60% of people who don't subscribe, please consider subscribing. It really does help YouTube know that I bring you value and they'll share my channel to more people. Thank you. Now, onto the sound sample. Let's hear how it sounds with my 1974 Les Paul Custom. Les Paul Custom. So what's the clean tone? This is my 1964 blonde Fender Showman on its own. Actually, we're going into the pedal board and we've got the Polyverbs reverb on there, and also I've got a Mimic 2 delay. It sounds pretty good. The controls aren't really that interactive. I mean, these are kinda... I mean, you can get really audible and trebly. It's almost tinny. I suppose you cut through the mix. Really does have some sustain. And now here's what it sounds like with Fake Red, my homemade Telecaster. What's that up? It definitely doesn't clean up. Thank you for watching the video thus far, and a special thank you goes out to my mate Jimmy, who gave me this circuit to build and the components. And now for the final drum roll, please. I think this thing is a Burns Buzz Around. I bet you didn't think I was going to say that, did you? At first I thought it might be a tone bender. Of course it did. 3 germanium transistors. Kinda looks like a tone bender. I'm convinced it's a Burns Buzz Around. I'd like to know in the comments if you got it right or not. And if you like this video, you're going to love this video.